Fans, welcome to Nerd Words. We're going to talk about books, various genres. Tuesday, the latest Dresden Files came out.
Yeah, I've already started reading it. If you like the Dresden series, and you probably should like the Dresden series, if you've not tried the Dresden series, you should read the Dresden series. It's by Jim Butcher. This is book 15, 16. First couple of books, it starts out a little slow. He's universe building. I mean, one of our friends, Joe, avid reader just like we are, he had trouble with the first book, and he said he almost stopped, but he continued on through it and was really happy that he did, because I said he's building a universe early, and the universe expands around Harry Dresden, the lead character.
And I'll be honest, I first read Stormfront years ago, the first book, put it down. That's okay. And mostly it was because of a terrible TV show. I was bored and found it later. Let me give this another shot. And I voraciously went through the Dresden books after that.
Yeah, they're good stuff. This new one, I'm approximately a quarter to halfway in. And I say, if you like Dresden, you'll like this one. It takes place, of course, I believe, around a year later from when the last one ended. And that's all I'm going to say about it, because you just need to get out and read it. The other new release coming out I'm really looking forward to here in about a week is Mr. Mercedes by Stephen King.
Yeah, you know, of course, King rarely ever lets down. And just reading the previews of this book, I'm looking forward to reading it more than I've been looking forward to reading Dr. Sleep or Joyland.
Between short stories and novels, Mr. King is over 100 released pieces of fiction and a couple of pieces of nonfiction. Literally, The Apt Pupil and From a Buick 8 are the only two that I didn't absolutely love. Apt Pupil's a short story.
It actually made a better movie than it did a story.
I didn't care. Oh, Hearts in Atlantis, not the entire novel, just the story Hearts in Atlantis also. I didn't care that much for, but other than that, King, he's got about I guess 98% of his stuff I really love, and there was obviously one person in the world now that I could meet, it would probably be Stephen King.
And honestly, if you ever want to become a writer, read his book on writing.
Yeah, his own writing, it's really great, and it's nonfiction, fiction, his columns, everything he writes is golden. And he didn't get a lot of critical acclaim early on because, you know, face it, he himself once pointed out how snobby critics are. Mm-hmm. He said it seemed to him that if critics found out that more than 100 people read a particular book, they began to look down their nose at it.
And he was pigeonholed early on as a horror writer, which a lot of his stuff has some horrific things in it, but, I mean, you know, he's not just a horror writer.
Oh, no. I mean, the majority of his work I wouldn't really classify as horror. I mean, he does do some horror, and he did become famous for, especially...
Salem's Lot is horror.
Yeah, Salem's Lot's horror. Carrie is sort of horror.
Actually, Cujo isn't traditional horror, but it's one of the most horrific stories I've ever read, because man's best friend turns on you.
Pet Sematary is horror, The Dark Half, a few other ones like that are straight horror tales, but he writes, The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon's a bit scary, but not really a horror story per se. Obviously, Rita Hayworth in The Shawshank Redemption's not really a horror story.
The Stand's not a horror story.
The Stand isn't. It is a traditional horror story.
Eyes of the Dragon is actually one of the best fantasy novels I've ever read. So Mr. Mercedes has a ton of potential to be just awesome.
Yeah, it's probably my most anticipated book of the summer. And that's coming from someone who actually does love the Dresden Files series. But when something new from King comes out, it's my number one.
It's must read.
Of course, later on this year, he has another novel coming out. And then got another one in the plans after that, because he's very prolific. He seems to write 3 or 4 novels a year. Just really tough to do if you ever try to write.
Especially Stephen King-sized novels.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking 700 to 1,000 pages, 700 to 1,000 pages. Another big thing, just briefly touch on, probably going to give one shot for Under the Dome. He's writing the first episode. I will check that one out. I was pretty disappointed in how Under the Dome strayed vastly, just way off the reservation from the novel. The novel's an excellent piece of work.
Oh, yeah.
The entire story from the novel takes place in the course of a week. This one is just, who knows what they're going to do with it, but they got way off track. We'll see what happens with the episode he wrote, but I don't know if it'll be able to pull me back in and keep me viewing or not. It was pretty far off.
It was. Now, you're also reading or have just read a novel called The Strain.
I've just started reading it. Chris recommended it to me. So far, it started out really strong, but I'm reading it in Dresden at the same time. And if you've looked at the Nerdwords group, you see that Chris has posted most likely the trailer for The Strain in it. It's Guillermo del Toro and another fellow writing these books, and that's what the TV series is going to be based on. It's a vampire tale.
It's a scary vampire tale, not a sparkly vampire tale.
It is the good vampires.
Not shirtless douchebags, scary monsters.
You see the terrible imagery of a tiny worm crawling out of an eyeball in one of the previews, or the preview picture for it. Starts out, I'll just give a brief synopsis of the first 20 or 30 pages of it. A jet comes in for a landing on the runway at JFK Airport in New York City. Rolls down the runway, lands, stops in the middle of the runway. The entire power goes out on the jet, completely shut off. They don't know what caused it. What I'm going to is going to be the lead character, a scientist who works for the CDC, is called in, and the story takes off from there.
And it looks to be an excellent TV series.
Yeah, it will be coming on TV very soon. Obviously, look in the group here, and you'll see Chris posting about it quite often. He keeps everybody updated on everything like that coming down the pike.
Now, I'm about to start reading the Dresden Files, but I'm 3/4 of the way through a book called Star Wars Scoundrels. It's a Timothy Zahn novel. You know, he's probably the best, close between him and Kevin J. Anderson, who's written the best Star Wars stuff out there.
I would personally go with Zahn over anybody, and probably including stuff that Lucas writes for Star Wars.
This one, now you've read it completely through. This one's a lot of fun to me because it's set in the Star Wars universe. It has characters from both the movie and the expanded universe in it that I've grown to love reading and watching on film, but in a completely different sort of setting.
Yeah, I mean, Zahn, he's just excellent at what he does. Crafting any tale he does, especially crafting tales within the Star Wars universe. And Scoundrels obviously implies, the Han Solo type characters. So that's what you're going to get out of Scoundrels.
Han and Lando and Chewie are the characters that anybody who's seen Star Wars is going to be very familiar with in it. But it's also kind of the origin of an origin tale for Winter, who's Princess Leia's friend, nanny, aide-de-camp. It gives a lot of insight on her. And it's just a darn good book.
After meeting Timothy Zahn and speaking with him about the Star Wars novels, vast knowledge of the entire universe and the expanded universe, which is no longer the expanded universe, which is now the, I don't know what they call it, but none of these characters are ever going to be
on
part
film,
of the mainstream community.
But they're still well worth reading.
Film, but books are generally better than movies anyway, and as I said, the Grand Admiral Thrawn trilogy, you should have read it. If you've not, go read it. Probably maybe the best piece of Star Wars work out there, period, including the films. But it's just outstanding work.
It's definitely better than the prequel trilogy.
Yes.
I mean, the only thing that's maybe keeping it from being better than the original trilogy is The Empire Strikes Back.
And if you like to read, I can't recommend them highly enough.
And those are just 4 books that I talked about on Nerdwords. Watch your summer reading list. If you don't have a summer reading list right now, give those 4 books a shot.
Yeah, you should have a year-round reading list.
But I know a lot of people that have, they're going to go to the beach and take 2 or 3 novels.
People have more time in the summer when they're out of school and things like that.
And I agree with John. You should have a year-round reading cycle.
Join Goodreads. Most people that I know that like to read are on Goodreads, and you can set yourself a challenge. I set mine at 36 books this year. When I finish these 2, I'll be at 24 for the year. So right now I'm 8 books ahead of schedule, according to the Goodreads calendar.
And you get authors to interact with you. You've talked to Joe Hill on there.
I've talked to Joe Hill,
Stephen King's son, by the way.
Owen King, his other son. Stephen King added me as a friend on Goodreads. And I talked to Owen several times on there, and actually talked to Joe Hill on Twitter. He's very friendly. And Joe, add Horns, Nosferatu, Heart-Shaped Box to any kind of reading list you want to, because they're all outstanding. And Owen's book, Double Feature, was pretty nice too.
And if you're a comic fan, Joe's written a very good graphic novel series.
Lock and Key Comics. Joe's just a really talented writer. So I can't recommend his stuff highly enough. Horns, the movie, is out right now in certain markets. It stars Daniel Radcliffe, just about a guy who grows horns on his head and becomes able to read the thoughts of people around him and how they perceive him. And just a very interesting story. And I like Nosferatu even better than I liked Horns.
Bet that's a vampire tale.
Somewhat. You don't really get a clear. It actually, I'll just say this a little bit about it. It mentions Pennywise the clown and the fact that he controls part of the universe where the lead character, the lead villain from Nosferatu occupies as well.
That's nice. I like big expanded universes.
Now Joe said he was just putting that in there to give a little Easter egg treatment, I guess, to fans of his father.
Well, fans, that's 4 great books for you to read. We'll see you next time on Nerd Words.